Hello, this is Cindy Barber. I'm author of the Chronicle of Clean series, and I'm reading from my first book, Keeper of the Keystone. I'm on chapter 4, The Birthday Present. Michael was impatient for science to end. He peered at his battered watch with its plastic strap that held it together with a safety pin. Just 5 minutes left. Miss Dragon, the fiery science teacher, hovered over his shoulder, her steely eyes penetrating his test paper, scrutinising it for errors, while her tobacco breath left Michael wanting to gag. Holding his breath until she was at a safe distance, Michael watched gleefully as she stood directly behind Alvin and proceeded to exhale over the big lump of lard in the ear. Her thin-lipped mouth smiled as she glanced at his paper, knowing he had, once again, managed to fail. His test finished, Michael resumed and returned to his second favourite pastime, daydreaming. As usual, he imagined slugging Alvin across the chin, an occurrence which would never happen in real life. Just as his hand was connecting, he was brought back to reality by the sound of the bell signalling the end of the lesson. Shoving his torn pencil case into his hand-me-down satchel, he placed his test paper in her wrinkly hands and then escaped the classroom before snotty-nosed Alvin Aldwinkle tripped him up again. At the end of the science corridor stood his two best friends. In fact, Michael thought, they were his only friends. Hazel pushed her long dark hair away from her flushed face, her blue eyes sparkling brighter than normal. Dan, meanwhile, had his hands tucked in his pockets, as usual, and was staring at the floor. Dodging the onslaught of students cascading down the science corridor, Hazel handed Michael a carrier bag. Today was July the 5th, Michael's 15th birthday. He hadn't expected anything, so he was surprised and excited by their gesture. As they headed for their lockers, he pulled out his birthday card, tore open the envelope, and gazed longingly at the red convertible on the front. He would have been happy with a Ford or a Vauxhall. "Thanks," Michael exclaimed, whilst wishing his mum had a car. But with only a cleaner's wage to support them, they had very few luxuries, least of all a car. For as long as he could remember, he'd wished his dad hadn't left when he was a baby. At night, in bed, he'd prayed for his dad to return, to walk through the door with his arms open wide, but he knew it could never be any more than a dream, because even if his dad still was alive, he knew they wouldn't recognise each other. "Come on, Michael," Hazel tapped her foot impatiently. "Sorry." Shoving his hand into the bag, he pulled out a small, neatly wrapped present. Ripping the paper apart excitedly, he discovered a box, which, when opened, contained the most exquisite ruby ring he'd ever seen. Although he couldn't help but think it looked a bit feminine, Michael stared in disbelief. He'd never owned any jewellery before, except for his decrepit watch. His mum had promised to buy him a new one with a metal strap for his birthday, but Michael was certain she wouldn't be able to afford it. It's wicked. Where did you get it? It must have cost a fortune," Michael stammered. Unexpectedly, he felt a tear welling up, which he quickly wiped away, just in case Alvin saw him and really did make him cry. He'd never had such a lovely present. His mum was amazing, but she had to work really hard just to provide essentials such as food and clothes. Luxuries were out of the question. "Like it?" inquired Hazel, who looked as excited as Michael felt. "I love it. How on earth could you afford it?" he asked, hoping he wasn't going to have the police knocking on his door, charging him with possession of stolen goods, which wouldn't go down too well with his mum. "You'll never believe it," said Hazel. "Go on, Dan, tell him." Dan, who hadn't spoken since Michael had opened his present, began to explain. "Last week, as we were discussing what to get you for your birthday, we noticed a strange little shop on the corner of the high street. Neither of us recognised it, so we decided to take a look inside. It was empty except for an old man behind the counter. A very strange, very old man." As Dan got carried away with the shop owner, Michael took the opportunity to try the ring on for size. Sliding it over his knuckle, he stared at it in disbelief. It fit him perfectly, which confused him somewhat. For when he'd first taken it out of the box, he'd felt certain it would be too big for him. Obviously excited, Hazel picked on the story, her arms flailing in the air like an octopus on caffeine. We glanced around to see if we could find anything appropriate, and before we knew it, the old man had approached and asked if we needed any help. Well, we told him we was looking for a birthday present, but hadn't a clue what to buy. The next thing we know, continued Dan, he shuffled towards us and gave us a strange look. Then he closed his eyes and he asked us your name. I can't say I've ever experienced that type of sales technique before, but with nothing to lose, we told him your name and age. Honestly, Michael, it was unbelievable. As soon as he heard your name, his face turned deathly pale and he looked like he was having trouble breathing. Hazel carried on. We thought he was having a heart attack, so we grabbed his arms to stop him from collapsing. Then, as if nothing had happened, his face lit up and he muttered something under his breath. I could have sworn it was something about finally finding you. Glancing at Michael, Hazel watched for his reaction, but Mike, as dumbfounded as his friends, was at a complete loss as to who this man was. However, she had him fully captivated and he listened more intently. Slightly concerned by his interest in you, we were just about to leave when he called out, saying that he had the perfect gift. With that, he produced this magnificent ring from his trouser pocket. We couldn't believe our eyes. Completely gobsmacked, agreed Dan. We tried saying it was out of our price range, but he insisted we take it. And that it was free. And that it was meant for you. Again, Hazel gave Michael a quizzical look, but when he remained silent, she continued, Then, as if things couldn't get more curious, just as we were leaving, he asked us to tell you it was from an old relative and that he'll visit you soon. I tried asking him what he meant, but before I'd finished my sentence, he'd vanished, like just disappeared into thin air. Sounds like something from one of your books, doesn't it? Joked Hazel. Michael was stumped. He didn't know any strange old men, and as far as he knew, he didn't have any living relatives. Come on, Michael, stop daydreaming, urged Hazel as she straightened the collar of her expensive new jacket. Feeling scruffy next to them, Michael pulled his arm out of his jacket sleeve and shoved his sorry excuse for a coat in his satchel. Thank you for joining me.